Welcome to another episode of Left Off the Map. On this episode, we're going to learn all about miso. We're going to travel to Launceston, have a look at Meru Miso, how they've started and what they're doing. Miso in Tasmania, it's a bit of an odd one. I had no idea that they existed. They do an absolutely wonderful job. They use completely organic produce, produce this really healthy miso that has a wonderful flavour. So today I'm going to be cooking miso mushrooms. It's an absolutely amazing vegetarian dish, and miso gives it that real sort of meaty texture, that umami flavour. Meru Miso uses completely organic chickpeas in their process, so that gives a more biodynamic product, which means there are more enzymes and probiotics in the miso. So it's actually really good for your gut, and that has a whole range of benefits. They're sort of proving that if your guts are healthy, your brain's healthy. So I'm going to make my miso paste now. I'm going to add the soy, sesame, honey, miso and a bit of garlic, and that'll give us a beautiful sauce for us to roast our mushrooms in. All right, so I've got my miso paste ready to go. I now need to just chop some mushrooms up, and then we'll put them in some baking paper with our paste and a little bit of butter, and then they're ready to go in the oven to roast. All right, so I'm gonna chop my mushrooms. So I've got some enoki mushrooms here. These are absolutely amazing. It gives a great look to the dish, but they're also fantastic and versatile. You can make chips out of them, just fry them. You get a beautiful crunchy mushroom, but today we'll be roasting them. Lovely. I absolutely love mushrooms because they'll take on any flavour you give them. So absolutely perfect to take on the miso today. The miso we're using today is a chickpea miso. Traditionally, miso is made from soybeans, so it's a really great way for people that aren't so tolerant of soy to get that miso flavour. So the last mushroom I'm using is an oyster mushroom. You can just tear these, they're very, very delicate. Oyster mushrooms are absolutely beautiful, just on the barbecue over charcoal. Mushrooms onto my baking paper. We're going to seal this up to get all the flavour in. There we go. It's going to be quite a full bag, I'd say. I've got a couple of pieces of baking paper. I'm going to wrap the mushrooms in it. I've also got some aluminium foil underneath. This will allow it to hold its shape. Okay, so my mushrooms are ready to go. I'll put my miso paste over the top. Beautiful. And finally, a little bit of butter, and that'll just melt through and be absorbed by the mushrooms. Cool. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up now. So I've made my little money bag. These are going to go into the oven at 180 degrees for about 20 minutes. All right, I've got my sourdough and avocado all ready to go, plated up. Mushrooms are in the oven, they're almost ready. We'll pull those out and serve it up. Okay. They do smell good. Oh. All right. Beautiful. Okay, so my mushrooms are beautiful. They're roasted down, they're soft. That butter has really been absorbed. All that flavour's in the mushrooms now. We're ready to serve. So I talked to Chris at Meru Miso, and he was actually an ex-Navy warfare officer. And just a massive foodie, and just loves his miso. And amazing to sort of start up in Tassie, of all places, with such a sort of quintessentially Japanese ingredient. So awesome to have it here in Tassie. The lime in the avocado is going to offset the sort of umami flavours in the mushrooms beautifully. Should be a really lovely sort of breakfast dish. If you wanted to take this from a breakfast dish, move it into lunch, great with roast vegetables. You can put miso in pretty much everything, but these mushrooms will transfer to almost any dish you like. Now time to join Chris and I at Meru Miso in Launceston. Chris, I don't know a lot about miso, I just know it tastes really good. I love it with mushrooms. But can you give me a bit of background as to how it's made?
So we start with Australian grown rice, and we then grow a fungus on that rice, which is a really interesting process in itself. Once we've grown that fungus on it, it's called koji. We mix the koji with the soybeans or the chickpeas and the salt, mix them up really well, then put them in the fermenter, and we let them sit for 6 weeks. We don't do anything to it while it's fermenting. We don't control the temperature. We don't check it, poke it, smell it. We just leave it alone. And then 6 weeks later, we've got delicious miso.
It's quite a simple process. How do you end up with all these different products?
So the main difference between them is the ratio of ingredients that we use. So the white miso has a really high proportion of the koji, which gives it the white colour, and it gives it the really sweet taste. The red miso has got less koji. It's got a little bit more salt, but more soybeans. And so you get more of a savoury flavour with that one. And the chickpea, we've really gone with the sort of middle range for our salt and koji mix that we do here. But the chickpeas bring a really nice nutty flavour to the miso. So really, really good for salad dressings.
Okay. So yeah, well, could you explain a bit more what you'd recommend each one for?
Sure. So I love using this one in sweets. So miso caramel is my go-to. I've got a bit of a sweet tooth. So yeah, if you can do a miso caramel with the sweet white miso, delicious. Also really good in choc chip cookies.
Choc chip cookies?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
And people don't, but if you think of salted caramel, salted chocolate, or even, you know, if you've got peanut butter in a chocolate, you're getting that salt anyway. So a little bit of that, delicious.
Right.
The sweet red miso, I love doing that with mushrooms or with beef. It makes a really good glaze for eggplant. Eggplant, really underrated vegetable, and pairs really well with miso.
Yeah, you can see the colour difference in this one. Is this a heavier sort of...
It's a heavier flavour, and you can see the difference in colour. When you hold them side by side, there's a real difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get a stronger flavour out of this one?
Stronger flavour out of that one. And I love using the chickpea miso for salad dressings.
Okay.
Yeah, so really, really easy, just equal parts chickpea miso, olive oil, and choose a citrus or a vinegar to go with it.
Yep.
And you've got an instant salad dressing.
Beautiful. Well, I think I'd like to take a sweet red miso to try to start with.
Excellent.
One at a time. Come back for more later. So where do you guys sell your product?
So this is distributed nationally. It's in health food stores and independent grocers right around the country.
Okay, nice. And so, like starting out, did you have a certain market in mind?
We had an idea that that people who were into fermented food were going to enjoy miso, and they were probably the people that understood what it was and how to use it. And so that was the target market initially. Now we're working really hard to try and get as many people on board the miso journey as possible. So we're putting out recipes and teaching people how it's made, what to do with it, and trying to spread the word.
Yeah, well, you've got some pretty good products.
So we've got some powdered miso. So we freeze dry it. The freeze dry it because that helps preserve the flavour, but it also preserves the good enzymes and the good bacteria that we want from the fresh miso.
So the good bacteria can still survive in the dry.
They're still in there, and we've even mixed that with water again and turned it into a paste and put it back on the shelf, and it's kept fermenting. The flavour has improved, the colour has changed, so we know that everything's alive in there.
So this one, just for a longer shelf life, is that what you'd go for with the powder?
For a longer
version?
shelf life, and then we also have it in the single-serve sachets.
Yep.
So it's just a little bit easier to have while you're out on the go. You can take it camping, put it in the drawer, in the office, wherever it might be easier.
That's really cool. I wouldn't have thought you'd get the gut benefits with a dried product.
Yeah, no, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So we do that. We've got the koji grains. We have a lot of people who like to make their own miso at home. You can use the koji grains to make a whole heap of other products as well. So one of those is the shio koji that we've got there. You can use it to make amazaki, which is a sweet rice porridge.
Okay.
And you can use it to make sake and a whole heap of things. So people like to sort of do their home fermenting with our koji grains, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then the one you've got there, the shio koji, is this is a really great marinade. So you've got the salty flavour, you've got the umami from the koji, and you've got all of those enzymes. So if you soak meat in that, you'll actually tenderise the meat. You get a great flavour penetrating into the meat, and it's just fantastic on its own. So that's
amazing. I've never used or seen anything like this, and in all the time I've been cooking, I've never seen anything like it. So I need to get some miso for Ben back in the studio. What would you recommend?
So I recommend the red. The red at the moment is tasting great. It's coming out really well. Really versatile miso that's going to go across a lot of different flavour profiles and a lot of different cuisines.
Excellent. That'll be perfect. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for coming by.
Beautiful. Cheers.
Since I went to my first ever barbecue at my auntie and uncle's place and they showed me how you can cook spare ribs on the barbecue, it's probably been my favourite thing to eat on a barbecue. And they're perfect on their own, just with a little bit of salt, but I want to show you how you can almost do a cheats char siu. Now, char siu is Chinese pork, and it normally gets brined and marinated for a long time. It's like a 3-day process to try and end up with the good char siu that you get at a Chinese restaurant, so the barbecued plum pork that you get at a Chinese restaurant. I'm going to show you how you can speed that process up a little bit using the condiments that I've got in front of me to make a marinade, and then cook your spare ribs like you normally would. Just brush them with your marinade as you're cooking away, and you'll end up with a similar sort of flavour that takes maybe half an hour instead of 3 days. The first thing I want to do is make my marinade. So in this bowl here, I've got a basting brush. In the bowl, I want to put all this together. So the first thing is honey. So the sweetness of the char siu is going to come from the honey. Now, if you wanted to go more like a Southern American flavour, you could put maple syrup if you wanted to, or treacle or golden syrup, or one of those things. You just need some sweetness from somewhere. This is hoisin, another one of those great Chinese sauces. Then we've got Chinese 5-spice. This is the main flavour that you're going to get in char siu, apart from sort of that plum porky barbecue flavour. The underlying spice is this Chinese 5-spice. Put that in. Then some star anise. So they've got almost a licoricey licorice sort of flavour, which is surprisingly sweet when they come in star anise. Something like fennel seed is a little bit bitter, but the licorice aniseed flavour that you get from star anise is really nice and sweet. Pop those in. Then shaoxin, so some cooking wine, Chinese cooking wine. Put that in. brown sugar. You can see most of this is sweet. The Shaoxin is a little bit acidic, a little bit astringent. And then I've got ginger and garlic here, which I'm gonna need to chop up, pop in. So garlic, roughly chop it. We just want the flavour, so it doesn't have to be super fine. We're not gonna be, you don't have to have it super fine because we're not gonna be cooking it off. We just want that flavour to permeate the sauce. So you could just, actually, if you didn't want to go through the whole process of, you could just do that and just crush it to release the flavours, the oils, and pop that in. Same with the ginger. I'm not going to worry about peeling it. Again, I just want that flavour that comes out of it. So you don't have to get a spoon and peel it. Roughly chop it. Again, with marinades, you can get away with that. And then I want a pinch of salt. Pork loves salt, so you're going to need some acidity, some saltiness in this somewhere. Mix all that together. And that is our marinade. I just want my zest, microplane, the zest of an orange, and then my pork ribs will go straight onto the barbecue. If you wanted to, you could marinate this. So if you had an extra spare hour up your sleeve, you could pour all of this over the top of your ribs in a roasting tray, pop them in the fridge, and let them sort of mingle, let those flavours start to impart on the pork itself. But for something like this with such strong flavours, I don't think that's necessary. You can get away with the marinade just cooking on the ribs and you'll still get all the flavour you want because it is such a strong basting sauce. Okay. Mix all that in. A little bit of oil. Ribs on. All right, they are pretty much done. They've been on there for about, or even probably close to half an hour, between 20 minutes and half an hour, I reckon. And depending on how thick your spare ribs are is obviously how long it's going to take to cook through. But you can cook them for quite a long time because there's so much fat in the belly that they're not going to dry out. So keep cooking, keep cooking, keep cooking until you start to get these dark, sort of caramelised black bits on there. They're the bits that you're really after. That's where the flavour is going to come from. So now that we've got a nice bit of colour on that, nice amount of colour, they can come off. That's our sort of cheat half an hour char siu pork. Instead of going through all the process that you have to go through to get that normal char siu pork flavour. It's a great recipe for out in the bush because it's very, very simple. You don't require a lot and all you need is heat. So whether you're using the char grill plate on top of the Oz Pig or the barbecue plate on top of the Oz Pig, you still get that same flavour and that same creation at the end because you're just trying to caramelise the sugars that are in that marinade. Now, before you all head off and make your own miso creations, we're going to give you a few little tips. Firstly, don't boil your miso. You'll lose the flavour and a lot of the nutritional value. Secondly, miso doesn't melt. So when you have your marinades to put on meat, make sure you wipe all that off. Otherwise, you'll end up burning the miso and it will go bitter. Miso and tomatoes is a great combination. Tomatoes love salt and miso is salty. Miso and citrus go really well together. So when you're making your marinades or your sauces or your dressings, think of that combination between a citrus fruit and the miso. Now, last thing I have to tell you, when you're making dressings, because miso is chunky, if you do the normal thing where you put Dijon in, your oil, your lemon juice, if you substitute your Dijon for the miso and shake it up, it's going to end up lumpy. So the best way to get around that, get your citrus first, put your miso in and make a paste to thin the miso out and break up all the lumps, and then create your dressing from there and shake it up. So there's some great miso tips. Hopefully you enjoy this little product as much at home as I do.